The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't because I saw a message or caught her in a lie. It was because she forgot my birthday. We had been together for 6 years, and she never forgot anything: anniversaries, deadlines, even the name of my high school dog. That morning, she kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her coffee, and rushed out the door without a word. No smile. No joke. No happy birthday. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself she was stressed. Love made me good at explaining things away. Her name was Claire, and when we met, she felt like the kind of person you build your life around without realizing you're doing it. She was warm, impulsive, and endlessly supportive of my dreams. I was an assistant manager at a hardware store back then, and she talked about my future like I was already successful. "You just don't see it yet," she used to say. I believed her more than I believed myself. We moved in together after a year. The apartment was small, but it felt like ours in a way I'd never felt about any place before. We shared a bed, a bathroom, and eventually, a routine. She worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm. I worked long shifts and came home smelling like sawdust and oil. She would sit on the couch with her laptop, legs tucked under her, asking about my day while pretending to listen and answering emails at the same time. I thought that was just adulthood. The changes didn't happen all at once. They arrived quietly, like dust settling on furniture. She started locking her phone. She began taking late meetings. She stopped asking about my day. I noticed the way she dressed differently for work. Sharper, more careful. New perfume, new shoes. I joked about it once. She said she was trying to be taken more seriously at the office. I told her she already was. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The night she forgot my birthday, I made dinner for myself and waited. I told myself she was planning a surprise. When she came home at nearly 10, she looked tired and distracted. She apologized quickly and handed me a small paper bag from a bakery. Inside was a single cupcake with a candle already melted into the frosting. "I'm sorry," she said. "Today was insane." I wanted to ask what was insane about it. I wanted to ask who she had been with. I wanted to ask why she smelled like someone else's cologne. Instead, I hugged her and told her it was fine. That was my pattern. See something strange. Feel something wrong. Choose silence. A few weeks later, I found the credit card charge. It was from a hotel downtown. I stared at the screen on my phone while standing in the hardware store aisle between paint rollers and extension cords. My hands were shaking. I convinced myself it was a mistake. A client lunch. A conference room rental. Anything but what my stomach was telling me. That night, I asked her about it. She didn't hesitate. It was for work. We had a presentation and needed a quiet place. I didn't know what kind of job required a hotel room, but I nodded like I did. She leaned over and kissed my forehead, like I was a child who needed reassurance. That kiss should have felt comforting. It felt like a dismissal. The next crack in the story came from someone else. A guy named Mark from my store who lived in our building. One night, while we were closing up, he asked casually, "Hey, isn't that your girlfriend?" He showed me a photo on his phone. Claire was in the lobby with a man I had never seen before. They were standing close. Too close. She was waiting for the elevator with him last night, Mark said. They looked pretty cozy. I laughed. I told him he was mistaken. I told him she worked late. I told him it was probably a coworker. But I couldn't unsee the image. Her hand was on the man's arm. Her head tilted toward him in a way I recognized. That was the look she used to give me. When I got home, she was already asleep. Her phone was on the nightstand, face down. I stared at it for a long time. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would wake her. I didn't touch it. Instead, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself I was overreacting. Telling myself love meant trust. Telling myself I didn't want to become the kind of man who checked phones. But something inside me had shifted. A small, sharp piece of doubt had lodged itself in my chest. The next morning, she left early without waking me. On the kitchen counter, she had written a note. "Busy day? Don't wait up." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket like it was evidence. That was the moment I understood something important. I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of discovering that I never really had her at all. I started paying attention in ways I never had before. Not like a detective, not at first. More like a man who suddenly realized he had been living on assumptions. I noticed what time she left, what time she came back, how often she said the word meeting. I noticed how she angled her phone away from me on the couch and how she flinched when it buzzed. One evening, I asked her if she wanted to go out for dinner. Just us. No takeout, No laptops, no rushing. She hesitated long enough for me to feel it. I already ate with coworkers, she said. Maybe tomorrow? Tomorrow never came. Instead, her schedule filled with things I wasn't part of. Networking events, client dinners, late-night calls she took on the balcony. She would come back inside with her voice still warm from someone else's laughter and look at me like she had forgotten I was there. I didn't confront her again. I tried to become easier to live with. I cleaned more. I complained less. I asked her about her work, even though I barely understood it. I told myself this was what long relationships required: adaptation, patience, quiet endurance. One night, I woke up to her getting dressed in the dark. It was past midnight. "Where are you going?" I asked. She froze for a second. "I forgot something at the office." She was wearing makeup. Not much, but more than she ever wore for workdays. "Now," I said. She sighed. "Do we have to do this?" "Do what exactly?" "Ask questions. Want answers." I let her go. The next day, I called in sick and went to the building where she worked. I stood across the street like an idiot, watching people enter and leave. I didn't even know what I was hoping to see. Proof? Relief? A reason to stop feeling insane? She came out around 6. She wasn't alone. The man from the photo was with her. He touched the small of her back as they walked. She leaned into him. They didn't see me. I stood there, invisible, watching my life rearrange itself without my permission. I followed them at a distance. They went into the same hotel from the credit card charge. I didn't go inside. I sat in my car and stared at the entrance until my hands went numb on the steering wheel. When she came home that night, she smelled like the same cologne again. I asked her directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" Her face changed in a way I will never forget. Not anger, not fear, calculation. "Why would you ask me that?" she said. I told her what I saw. I told her about the hotel. I told her about the photo. My voice shook. Hers didn't. "He's a consultant," she said. "We work closely. You're reading into things because you're insecure." Insecure. The word landed like a verdict. I wanted to scream. I wanted to pack a bag. Instead, I apologized. I told her I was stressed. I told her I trusted her. That was the night I understood how much power she had over me. I needed her version of reality more than I needed the truth. A week later, she said she needed space. Just a few days. A work trip, officially. She packed carefully, like she was preparing for something important. Before she left, she hugged me too tightly. "You know I love you, right?" she said. I said it back, because I still believed love was stronger than evidence. When she was gone, the apartment felt like a place I had rented instead of lived in. Her toothbrush still leaned against mine. Her sweater still hung on the chair. Every object felt like a witness. On the third night, her laptop buzzed on the coffee table. She had forgotten it. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. I didn't want to become this person, but I already was. The password was my birthday. Inside her email, everything made sense at once. Hotel confirmations. Long messages signed with hearts. Plans for when things are settled. Complaints about how complicated her life was. How guilty she felt. How trapped she felt. She had been seeing him for 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of pretending we were still building something together. I sat on the floor and read until I couldn't breathe. By the time she came back 2 days later, I was empty. She walked in smiling, and I knew then that whatever we were about to become, it wouldn't be what I thought love was supposed to look like. I didn't confront her right away. I watched her unpack, listened to her talk about traffic and deadlines, nodded at the right moments. It felt like acting in a play where I already knew the ending. Every word she said landed on the evidence I had read and turned into something hollow. That night, I waited until she was brushing her teeth. "Did you enjoy your trip?" I asked. She smiled at her reflection. "Exhausting, but productive." I asked her to sit with me on the couch. She did, crossing her legs the way she always did when she wanted to seem calm. I told her I had opened her laptop. Her face tightened for half a second before she masked it. "You went through my email?" she said. "That's a huge invasion of privacy." I told her what I found. I told her how long it had been going on. I told her his name. She didn't deny it. She leaned back and looked at the ceiling. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said. "It just did." I asked her if she loved him. She hesitated. "I care about him." I asked her if she loved me. She hesitated longer. "I do," she said. "But things changed." "You changed." That hurt more than the truth. I asked how I had changed. She said I was tired all the time, that I didn't talk about the future anymore. that I was comfortable when she wanted more. I wanted to tell her that the future I imagined always had her in it. I wanted to remind her of the nights we planned, trips we never took, and houses we never bought. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Why didn't you leave? She looked at me then, really looked at me. Because I didn't want to hurt you. We sat there in silence, two people who knew exactly how much damage had already been done. She said she was confused. She said she needed time. She said she didn't want to lose either of us. Hearing that made something cold and solid settle in my chest. I realized I had been sharing my life with someone who had been quietly preparing an exit. For a week, we lived like strangers pretending to be a couple. We slept in the same bed, inches apart. She went out at night. I stayed home and stared at walls. Every time she left, I wondered if she was choosing him again. One evening, she didn't come home. No message. No call. At 3 in the morning, I sat at the kitchen table and finally understood how small my world had become. I wasn't waiting for her. I was waiting for permission to stop loving her. When she came back the next afternoon, she looked relieved, like someone who had made a decision. I think we should take a break, she said. Break meant goodbye, but she didn't say it. She started packing that night. I helped her carry boxes to the car because I didn't know how to say no. Before she drove away, she hugged me and whispered that she hoped we could still be friends someday. I stood in the parking lot until her car disappeared. Then I went back upstairs and sat on the floor of the empty bedroom. For weeks, I replayed everything. The forgotten birthday, the hotel charge, the photo, the emails. I kept wondering which version of her had been real. The woman who said she believed in me, or the one who told another man she felt trapped. I blamed myself because it was easier than blaming her. I told myself I should have noticed sooner. I told myself love meant sacrifice, and I had just sacrificed too much. One night, I deleted her number. Not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. I realized that love hadn't made me blind. It had made me willing. Willing to ignore, willing to excuse, willing to accept less than the truth. And that was the most painful part. She didn't take my trust. I gave it away, piece by piece, until there was nothing left to protect me. I tried to move on the way people say you should. I went to work. I went to the gym. I forced myself to meet friends I had quietly neglected while building my life around her. They listened, nodded, and told me it would get better with time. Time felt abstract, like a place I didn't know how to reach. A month after she left, I ran into her by accident. I was at a grocery store near our old apartment, staring at a shelf of cereal I never bought, when I heard my name. She stood there with a basket in her hand, hair shorter than before, eyes too bright. For a moment, I forgot everything and smiled back. We talked about nothing. Weather, work, how strange it felt to see each other like this. She said she was staying with a friend now. I didn't ask which one. I didn't ask about him. She didn't ask about me. Before we parted, she touched my arm. You look better, she said. I walked home with a knot in my stomach. Better meant different. Better meant no longer hers. That night, I dreamed we were still together. In the dream, nothing was wrong. When I woke up, the absence hit me harder than the betrayal ever had. I realized I wasn't missing her. I was missing the version of myself who believed we were safe. Weeks passed, then months. The anger faded first. The sadness stayed. I started to remember things I hadn't noticed before. How often I had been the one to compromise. How often I had apologized when I didn't understand why. How small I had made my world to keep her inside it. One afternoon, I found a box of her things in the back of my closet. Old photos, notes from when we first met, a postcard she had sent me on a trip years ago, promising she couldn't wait to come home. I sat on the floor and read them all. They felt like artifacts from a life that belonged to someone else. I realized something then that scared me more than losing her. I had built my sense of worth on being loved by her. When she left, it wasn't just the relationship that ended. It was the proof I thought I had that I mattered. So I started trying to matter to myself. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden transformations. I signed up for a night class in something I had always wanted to learn. I took a weekend trip alone and discovered I liked being quiet without feeling abandoned. I learned how to eat dinner without waiting for someone else to come home. One night, she texted me. Just a simple, "How are you?" I stared at the screen until it went dark. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to answer immediately. I typed and erased 3 different responses. Then I wrote the truth. I'm learning how to be okay. She replied with a heart emoji I had seen too many times before. It didn't mean what it used to. I didn't answer again. The longer I stayed away, the clearer things became. Love hadn't failed me. I had failed myself by believing love meant endurance instead of honesty. I had confused loyalty with silence and trust with denial. I had thought holding on was the same as caring. Sometimes, I still wondered if she ever regretted it. If she ever thought about the man who watched her walk away and helped carry her boxes anyway. But the question stopped hurting as much. Regret belonged to the past. I was finally standing somewhere else. The day I took her sweater off the chair and put it in a donation bag, I felt lighter than I had in a year. It wasn't symbolic at first. It was practical. But when I tied the bag shut, I understood what I was really doing. I was choosing not to confuse love with blindness again. I met someone new in a place I didn't expect. It wasn't at a bar or through an app. It was at the night class I had signed up for, sitting in a room that smelled like dry erase markers and old books. Her name was Lena. She sat 2 rows ahead of me and always asked questions that made the instructor pause. We didn't talk at first. We just shared small rituals, holding the door, passing papers down the row, smiling when one of us answered wrong. It felt safe because it didn't feel like anything yet. One evening, the power went out during a storm. The room filled with nervous laughter and the blue glow of emergency lights. Someone joked about canceling class. The instructor shrugged and said we could leave. Lena turned around and said, "Well, that was dramatic." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. We walked out together into rain that fell in sheets, and she offered to share her umbrella. We stood too close under it, pretending it was only because of the weather. We talked about ordinary things. Work, music, the strange feeling of starting something new as an adult. She told me she had just ended a long relationship. I didn't say anything about mine. Not yet. We started getting coffee after class, then dinner, then long walks where the city felt quieter than usual. She listened in a way that made me realize how little I had been heard before. When I told her about Claire, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt understood. "You didn't see it because you didn't want to," she said gently. "That doesn't make you weak." It was the first time someone said that without trying to comfort me. Being with Lena was different. Not better in a dramatic sense. Just clearer. When something bothered her, she said it. When I felt unsure, I admitted it. There was no performance, no careful shaping of myself into what I thought she wanted. One night, she stayed over. We lay awake talking until morning. At some point, I realized I wasn't waiting for her to leave. I wasn't afraid of what she might find if she looked too closely. I felt present instead of vigilant. A few weeks later, I saw Claire again. She was waiting outside my building when I came home from work. I hadn't given her my new address. Seeing her there felt like seeing a ghost standing in sunlight. "Can we talk?" she asked. We sat on the steps. She looked tired in a way I recognized. She said things hadn't worked out the way she thought they would. She said she missed me. She said she wanted to know if there was still a chance. For a moment, I imagined the old version of myself answering her. The one who would have seen this as proof that everything had meaning, that suffering had a purpose. Instead, I felt something quieter. I told her I was seeing someone else. I told her I hoped she was okay. I told her I didn't want to go back. She cried. I didn't. When she left, I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. That night, Lena asked me why I seemed distracted. I told her what happened. I expected jealousy, or fear, or questions. She just nodded. "Are you okay?" I thought about it. Really thought. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." Later, lying next to her, I understood what had changed. Love didn't feel like holding my breath anymore. It felt like exhaling. I still remembered what it was like to be blind, to explain away what hurt, to mistake silence for peace. But now, I could see the difference between loving someone and disappearing into them. The story with Claire had taught me what I didn't want. The story with Lena was teaching me what I could have. And for the first time, the future didn't look like something I had to earn by suffering. It looked like something I could walk into with my eyes open. Lena and I didn't rush into calling what we had a relationship. We moved the way 2 people move when they've both learned what happens when you pretend nothing is wrong. We checked in with each other. We said things out loud instead of assuming. It felt awkward sometimes, like learning a new language with the same mouth that learned an old one. One night, she asked me a question I hadn't prepared for. "Do you still think about her?" I could have lied. The old me would have. Instead, I told her the truth. Sometimes. Not because I want her back. Because I don't want to forget what that felt like. She nodded like that made sense. I think that's healthy. Healthy. Another word I wasn't used to applying to love. The more time passed, the more I noticed how differently my body reacted to this relationship. I didn't brace myself before difficult conversations. I didn't rehearse sentences in my head to avoid conflict. When something bothered me, I said it. When something bothered her, she said it. We didn't always agree, but we always knew where we stood. One evening, I ran into Mark from the hardware store again. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was seeing someone new. He smiled and said, "Good. You looked miserable for a long time." That stung more than I expected. I had thought I hid it well. I had thought love made me look devoted. To everyone else, I had looked like a man shrinking. A few days later, I found an old message thread between Claire and me while clearing out cloud storage. Years of photos and jokes and plans. I almost deleted it without opening it. Almost. Instead, I scrolled back to the beginning. We were so earnest. So certain. I read through it like a stranger reading a novel they already knew the ending to. There was no villain in those early days. Just two people promising things they didn't yet understand the weight of. For the first time, I felt something close to forgiveness. Not for what she did, but for what I had done to myself. I had chosen not to see. I had chosen not to ask. I had chosen to believe that love meant enduring confusion. That night, I told Lena about it. About reading the old messages. About realizing how much of my identity I had tied to being chosen. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "You don't have to be chosen anymore. You get to choose." It sounded simple. It wasn't. But it was real. The real test came a week later. Claire texted me again. A longer message this time. Apologies. Regrets. Memories. A question at the end. Can we meet one last time? I felt the old pull. The idea that closure came from one more conversation. One more explanation. One more chance to be understood. I showed the message to Lena. "I don't want to hide this from you," I said. "But I also don't want to hurt you." She read it slowly. "What do you want to do?" I thought about the man I had been. The one who waited for her to come home. The one who helped carry her boxes. The one who needed her story to make sense of his own. "I don't want to go backward," I said. So I wrote back something short. "I wish you well, but I don't think meeting is a good idea. Take care." When I sent it, my hands were steady. That surprised me. I didn't feel like I had won anything. I felt like I had closed a door that no longer led anywhere. That night, Lena fell asleep on my shoulder while we watched a movie neither of us cared about. I looked at her and felt something unfamiliar in a good way. Not intensity, not fear, stability. I finally understood that love hadn't made me blind by accident. I had closed my eyes because I was afraid of what I'd see. Now, seeing felt less dangerous than not knowing. A year passed without me noticing it. Not because time moved faster, but because I stopped measuring it by what I had lost. Life became a series of ordinary moments that didn't need to be dramatic to feel important. Grocery lists, shared jokes, plans that didn't feel like negotiations. Lena and I moved in together slowly. First a toothbrush, then a drawer, then a weekend where neither of us went back to our own place. When we finally talked about it, it felt less like a decision and more like admitting something that was already true. Living with her didn't erase the past. It changed how I understood it. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I remembered the nights I lay awake waiting for Claire to come home. The fear had felt like devotion back then. Now it felt like a warning I had ignored. One evening, while cleaning out a box of old paperwork, I found the birthday card Claire had given me years ago. Inside, she had written that she believed in me even when I didn't. I sat on the floor and read it twice. The words still mattered, but they didn't mean what they used to. They belonged to a different chapter, one that had already closed. I thought about the man I had been. How certain he was that love meant staying quiet. How proud he was of enduring confusion. How he believed that being patient would eventually turn into being understood. I didn't hate him. I felt sorry for him, and grateful that he had survived long enough to become someone else. Lena noticed I was quiet and asked what I was thinking about. I told her the truth. About the card. About the memories. About how strange it felt to look back without wanting to go back. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "That means it doesn't own you anymore." That night, I dreamed about Claire again. But it wasn't the same dream. She was standing far away, waving once before turning down a street I didn't follow. I woke up without the familiar tightness in my chest. Weeks later, I saw Mark again outside the store. He asked how things were going. I said, "Good," and meant it without checking myself for exaggeration. He said I looked different. Not happier exactly. Lighter. That word stayed with me. I had thought blindness was about not seeing what was happening in front of me. Now I understood it was about seeing it and choosing not to name it. Love hadn't made me blind on its own. I had let it become a place where I could hide from the truth. What I learned was simple, and it took years to learn it. Love is not supposed to feel like waiting for permission to exist. It is not supposed to shrink you. It is not supposed to turn questions into threats. It is supposed to make you more yourself, not less. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had asked harder questions earlier. If I had trusted my discomfort instead of her excuses. But those questions no longer felt urgent. They belonged to a road I didn't take, and I was no longer standing at the crossroads. One morning, Lena and I stood in the kitchen, half awake, arguing about whether the coffee was too strong. It was a small, stupid disagreement. It ended with laughter and two different mugs on the counter. There was no silence afterward. No fear. No performance. In that moment, I understood what love looked like when it wasn't blinding. It looked like being allowed to see clearly and still choosing to stay. I don't tell this story because I was betrayed. I tell it because I learned something I didn't know I needed to learn. I learned that trust without awareness is not love. It is surrender. And love that asks you to surrender yourself is not love at all. What I have now is quieter. It doesn't need drama to prove it exists. It doesn't need denial to survive. And every day, in small ways, I choose to keep my eyes open.